Good, thank you, Greg, and thank you everybody for tuning in today, and hopefully we can make your next hour worthwhile. So I do want to provide just a bit of an introduction to start with in terms of how we got to this point in time and bringing this webinar to you. And as we all know, MLA does work with both the Australian government and the red meat industry to invest in initiatives that contribute to profitability and sustainability and global competitiveness. Now, that's a very broad brush and it's very ambitious, but this is one example of one initiative where there was industry need to actually try and get through all the busyness in terms of what connectivity options were available, particularly for the north. But when you do start drilling down to it, actually the red meat industry is just broad. While we're talking about the northern industry today, look, red meat is produced across a vast amount of land in Australia. It accounts for about 26 million cattle, 66 million sheep, and about 4 million goats. So regardless of what livestock you manage, having connectivity is always a challenge, and you are part of a very vital picture of the extensive production systems across Australia. So being connected is a challenge, but justifying the capital outlay is often the biggest hurdle in terms of getting yourself established on farm. Look, becoming a member of MLA isn't automatic when you pay your levies, and it's important to realise that being a member of MLA allows you to have a lot of access to material such as Feedback magazine, which is actually a hard copy, which is good for those who still like receiving hard copies, but also e-newsletters in terms of 5-day feedback and prices and markets. And hopefully, fingers crossed, this year in Toowoomba, we will have red meat as our AGM and your opportunity to actually come to one of our premier events. So whilst there's a number of invitations to events throughout the year, the biggest challenge is, unless you are connected, you simply don't hear of these events that are coming up. Similarly, there's a lot of opportunities to be in touch with MLA, but again, unless you've got that degree of connectivity, which is not only reliable, but actually provides you with the access you need, it's very hard to get hold of these resources which MLA have produced for the industry's benefit. So I really wanted to get to that point to cover off that the project that we funded for the connectivity survey across Northern Australia was really aiming at making sure industry had their fair share of access to information that was available not only through MLA, but of course available through other sources. So last year we commissioned GGH Digital to conduct a survey for us across Northern Australia to look at what options were available for improving telecommunications, not just for putting it in, but actually improving what sort of resources you may have available. It was to look at current and future needs of pastoral operations, whether they be beef or sheep or goats. And it really was trying to look at the needs of not only staff, but the needs of resident families, if there were schools involved in some of these larger stations, but also in terms of connectivity, if you were starting to put sensors or devices across the property. And one of those could be automatic weather stations where you need connectivity to collect that data. It was all about identifying and surveying what was currently available, not only in terms of hardware on the ground, but in terms of satellite options for connectivity both within the farm and also outside to the likes of MLA. It was really aimed at trying to get some idea of how reliable some of these systems might be, their speed, their latency, but also to give producers some idea as to the complexity behind putting in systems. Now, some of those systems don't need to be overtly complex. They are really dependent on your needs on farm, but it's not always a simple plug and play exercise. So on the back of that final report, we've come to the webinar for today, and I just want to go through our presenters, whilst I still have a bit of time with this introduction. My name's Nigel Tomkins. I'm the Program Manager for the Grass-Fed Beef Program with Meat and Livestock Australia in Brisbane, and this survey was conducted under our program. Our next speaker is Bryce Leedham, who conducted the survey along with Brendan Siebert. Bryce is a senior engineer with GHD, and one of the properties that was actually part of the survey was Alexandria Station, a NAPCO property, and we've got Steve and Kate Drury online as well to talk about the practical aspects of getting connectivity on farm. And to wrap it all up, we have Alana Boulton, also from Meat and Livestock Australia in Brisbane. Alana is the Northern Beef Adoption Manager, and really it's how do we get these technologies promoted across industry, how do we increase adoption, and how do we get the northern sector better connected?
Okay, as Nigel mentioned, GHD were successful in bidding for this project work, and throughout the second half of last year, we undertook a both desktop study of the various telecommunications options that are available, pretty much Australia-wide, and then through assistance of MLA, I visited a number of properties around Northern Territory and North Queensland to get an understanding of what it's actually like out on these particular properties and to give some framework as to what's going to be realistic recommendations that we're able to make. So as you can probably see from the picture there, I'm not a country boy, but I do have a fair grasp on technology. I was the lead author of this report, along with Brendan and Tran and my team, who were able to do a lot of the groundwork and chasing down facts, figures, numbers, options. GHD does have over 80 different specialties that we work in, and one of those is agriculture. So thanks to Michael White, who gave me a lot of context around the industry itself. And also a quick thanks to Nigel and Ted from MLA, who played a big part in pulling this report together. The link is there to where the report is on the MLA website. I'm sure that will be made available to people after the session. So one thing that we found quite apparent is in most cases, there's not a one size fits all. It's not a one technology solves all your problems solution. And what we need to do is look at particular technologies that can work in tandem to provide the backhaul, the capabilities that were required on the property. In our report, we typically split these into two terminologies. One being the backhaul, that's the big pipe that comes into the station. Typically that'd be fiber, if available, which is not really available. It could be NBN fixed wireless services. It could be 3G, 4G, perhaps a private microwave radio, or quite commonly satellite. And then we also looked at access technologies. So what are the actual devices that are on the property going to connect to? This can typically be Wi-Fi. It might be low-powered WANs or Internet of Things, which I'll discuss a bit later. It may be LTE, the technology that underlies our 4G network. For some cases, it's just the availability of UHF. So the report looks at a lot of different technologies and runs over the pros, the cons, the typical applications for these different technologies, so you can have an understanding of where their strengths lie. We've also looked a bit at the cost of implementing them. So if I start this webinar at the end of our report, then we have our report findings showing up now. And we've tried our best to provide a comparison between the different technologies, although noting that they have vastly different capabilities, so it's not apples for apples. The first 5 entries are under build. So we've looked at these of what would be the cost to build bits of network yourself on your own properties and try to use a roughly per hectare cost normalized against a typical property size to give an idea of the comparative costs. On the right-hand side, we have the rating. A red flag is looking really not great value for money. The yellow flag indicates that there may be a case for this if you're able to take advantage of what you would connect to the network. And the green flag is, this is typically a good idea, and if available, it's definitely worth looking at. Looking at the first line there, the private LTE network. So that would be like having your own 4G mobile phone network that only you make use of on your property. It would provide some great performance. You'd be able to run security cameras. You'd be able to stream video in the middle of your paddock if you wanted to on this, but that comes at a cost. And as you can see, it's quite a larger cost than anything else in the list. We looked at privately owned 4GX light towers, where you may be able to install your own little 4G repeater. You typically want to do this around the homestead and provide some coverage of your property through that way. These are typically backed by satellite, so you are limited to some extent in terms of how much data can get out to the capabilities of satellite, which I'm sure a lot of people here are aware of already. But if you were within 4G range, you'd be able to essentially extend that 4G range through that option. That's covered in our report. A wireless mesh system, which is basically a number of different Wi-Fi access points combining together, can extend the limited coverage you get from a single Wi-Fi access point device to be able to cover a wider area. And we did note that some of the properties we visited are looking to do this around their homestead, so they'd have a few Wi-Fi access point devices connecting to each other to provide coverage to the buildings, the homestead, and where people are typically congregating, where the young kids are as well. Digital mobile radio, essentially an upgrade on UHF radio that you may be familiar with. It gives you some good options there at a reasonable cost for voice and text, such as SMS services, but it wouldn't allow for greater data transfer. The last line there is a LoRaWAN, a low-range wide area network, and this is one of the protocols that Internet of Things is built off of. I'm going to leave this one for now because I'm going to talk a bit more about it later on. We then looked at the options that you have for subscribing to a service, and we've compared these with a annual cost. In some cases, it's just a flat monthly charge. That's easy to work out. In some cases where it's a per message sent, then we've made some assumptions there to even it out. Narrowband Internet of Things is one option. So if you are within a 4G network range or close to a 4G network range, you may have access to Telstra's narrowband network already, and you would be able to place a compatible sensor there and connect into the existing Telstra infrastructure without having to build your own. We have the Ambien SkyMuster Plus satellite subscription. As we were undertaking this report, Ambien Satellite were bringing out 2 new products that really caught us right on the tail of the project. So in our report here, we have SkyMuster Plus, which is an improvement on the existing consumer service. They also released a business grade service, and I'm going to discuss that a bit later on. We then also have the standard 4G mobile network subscription, and that's a really good option, but you've got to be within range of the existing 4G network. There are some programs that are looking to improve 4G coverage within the regional areas. There is the government's mobile remote black spot program, and applications can be placed in for that program to get government funding to improve the 4G coverage in the country. Particularly, that would be looking mostly along the major transport routes throughout the middle of the country. So there's 3 technologies that I'm really keen to talk about today that I think are the most interesting that we've come across. That's not to say that you shouldn't look through the rest of the report and see if there's something more suited to your particular needs. The first one I wanted to look at is the Ambien Business Satellite, and our report doesn't really delve into this as it was released just shortly after publishing. We've made mention that we knew it was coming, but we didn't really have too many details about what it meant at the time, which we now have. So the Ambien Business Satellite is looking to take the existing SkyMuster satellite service that's available and to add some rigor around it to make it more of a business compatible product. As a result, you're going to get dedicated Ambien support services and a bit more guarantee on network availability that you don't currently have. Looking at the maximum speed, so for a consumer, the maximum you're looking at is 25 megabits per second download and 5 megabits per second upload. That's going to give you perhaps a HD picture on Netflix, but yeah, that's getting pretty tight. So the business one does offer a little bit of a speed increase with the option to get a burst speed increase up to 50 megabits per second, which is potentially at times double what you currently have. That burst speed being when there is network availability, when people aren't actually making use of the network, it'll release some of that unused speed to be allocated to the business customers. You also get a faster upload, which could be handy if you're constantly having to upload data to a head office, or if you're trying to, for example, video chat with someone remote from the station. In terms of data limits, the consumer plans, they cap out 150 gigabytes per month. The business plans available offer up to 1,000 gigabytes per month, and then top-ups of 100 gigabyte blocks at additional costs. So if you're running through data, a business plan could actually work out rather than trying to look at multiple consumer satellites. There is some Internet of Things availability through businesses that would allow you to hook up various sensors around the place, such as weather stations, counters, status indicators. They have cheaper per message plans available there. And they also offer redundant connectivity. So if one of your connections fails, you'll still be able to get that important data. And I'll give a bit more context to that later on. For network availability, the consumer NBN satellite just gives best effort. You get what you get. You don't get any compensation or any promises around when the satellite network's going to be available. For the business service, they offer a 99.7% uptime guarantee. You do get some additional features as well. They offer voice over IP telephone call priority over other data. They have bandwidth on demand services, so you're able to, if you're on a lower speed business plan, be able to peak up and down as you wish through a setting. They offer data pooling across various premises, so you may be able to make use of that 1,000 gigabytes across a couple of properties, a couple of different satellites using the same plan, and dedicated support lines, so you're not stuck in the standard NBN queue. These features do come at a cost. Obviously, as you can see there on screen, the consumer plans are around $75 per month. For a business plan, you're looking upwards of $650 per month. But if you're struggling to conduct regular business because you don't have that speed, you don't have the data, and you don't have the availability, then that kind of cost may make sense for you. You can see the link there up the top to the NBNCO site for this product. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that one for more details on the business satellite service that they offer. Okay, the second item I want to talk about today is to look at some of the Internet of Things products, and particularly we'll focus on two brands that are both Australian developed. So the Internet of Things, it's a very broad umbrella term, very deliberately. It covers low cost, low power, small data, sensors and transmitters that connect up to the cloud. So to give an example there, let's say you've got a water tank in the middle of nowhere. It takes you, a good half an hour to drive and go check up on it. You may wish to put a sensor in there to be able to read the water level in that tank. The low cost means that the sensor is going to be somewhere in the region, maybe $10, $20, $30. It's low power, which means that the batteries that you put in there will last, and we're talking years of battery life here. Small data, so in that instance of this water sensor, it may take a water level reading every 15 minutes, just take one little piece of data, which will be the number of where that water level is. And it only transmits small amounts of data periodically. But in this instance, for that application, that's more than enough. You'll be able to see the trends over time if you've only got 4 data points per hour. It's then connected into the cloud. That allows for easy device configuration. It means back at the homestead, you'll hop onto your web browser, or perhaps you've got a program that you're able to log into, and all these sensors will collate to the same area, and you're then able to view the results of those. And in some cases, you may actually look to link certain elements of data together to highlight when there's a problem. You may read 3 different data sources together, and it's only when all 3 alert that you actually need to go out and look at the problem yourself. There's a whole host of products on the market, and I guess a word of warning for those looking at Internet of Things is that we run a certain frequency range in Australia, which is different from other countries. So you need to make sure if you find a U-Butte sensor that looks really good from the US, that it is actually capable of doing the Australian frequencies. If I look at the Fleet device on the left, Fleet been developed out of Adelaide. And the box that you see there is their little antenna, gateway, modem, server, all in one. So you'd install this box somewhere out into the field, and then from that box you have a 15-kilometer roughly range where any LoRaWAN compatible device that runs on the right frequency range is able to connect to this box. This box then starts storing the data within it, and as the satellites go overhead that it connects to, it's then going to send that data up as one bunch, and that satellite will then send it back to the ground somewhere into this cloud environment where you will be able to go and view that data. So you get not quite real time, but near real time data being sent around, and this one box here, it's able to collect from a whole bunch of different sensors. So if you had, for example, a number of water tanks within that 15-kilometer range, you can store this one device and then sensors on each of the individual bits of equipment that you want to monitor, and it all comes back in. An alternative product offering that's out there is from another Australian company called Myriota, and they developed the chip that you can see there on the right. And this chip is now getting installed into a number of different sensors and devices that are commercially available, and they'll send themselves directly up to the satellite from this chip, from this device, which will have an antenna connected to it. So one example where the Myriota device may be more useful than the Fleet device is in equipment that can move. So the Fleet one we know that's going to stay within that 15-kilometer range, but if you're looking at sensors that are attached to a vehicle, or perhaps sensors on the livestock themselves that may move out of that 15-kilometer range, then this Myriota one with its dedicated antenna may be a better choice to get that data up and down. Of course, it's great to collect all this data and interesting to see what's going on, but it's really up to each producer to look at their use cases and understand, if I have this data, if I knew what was going on without sending someone out to physically look at it, what could I do with that? Can I reallocate that person? Does it mean running one less vehicle and therefore the costs of the vehicles are down? And that's just something that you need to do for yourself. Example we did show the Northern Pastoral Group. We put some numbers together and showed that you got roughly an even payback on direct costs that we could show, with the benefit that you now had data available that you may be able to use to help you plan your productions going forwards and make better use of the land and the equipment you have available. So this gives a bit of a diagrammatic view of what I was talking about before. If you look at this LPWAN gateway device in the middle here, that would be that Fleet box that I showed. Any of these red antenna signal icons, that would connect to the LPWAN gateway. So it could be your water tank equipment, it could be a motor sensor, it could be a weather station, it could be livestock itself. Connecting to the LPWAN gateway, that has the satellite modem built into it. It sends the data up by satellite that ends up in the cloud, which is really just a server somewhere. And then maybe if you've got 3G, 4G access to your property, you might connect to that one through 3G or 4G and be able to view the data at the homestead. The third thing I want to talk about today, and it's probably the most interesting and exciting one, but it's a bit of a we don't know yet, is low Earth orbit satellites. So the NBN service, that's what's called a medium Earth orbit satellite. That means it's sitting further away from the ground than these satellites are, the low Earth orbit satellites. And that low Earth orbit satellite gives it the ability to deliver a much faster bandwidth and also a lower latency or return signal. And the best way to describe that is if you think back to the analog telephone days and you're making an overseas call, when you would have that delay in the response from the person who you're talking with, that's essentially latency at work. So if we can speed that up, then it becomes more like a normal conversation that you're having with someone who's close to you, or a telephone call within the state. So at the moment, SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's space exploration company, they have 360 nanosatellites in orbit. These nanosatellites, which you can see an example of on the right, they're about the size of a bread bin or a loaf of bread. And they sit in a kind of trail of each other at the moment. By late 2020, so later this year, it's expected that they'll have enough satellites up that the service will be commercially available in North America. And then we can start to see if some of the claims that they're making are actually viable and get an idea of the kind of cost structure that you're going to see. Looking at their constellation being complete in 2027, at which time they have 12,000 satellites in orbit. Once they've got the 12,000 satellites, that's going to give them global coverage. And while they're not looking to compete in metro centres, because fibre, 5G are going to be able to do just as good a job, just as fast, what they're looking to do is cover areas like remote Australia, Africa, other remote regions that have difficulty being serviced by telcos, where it's just not cost competitive for them to build their infrastructure along the ground out to those areas. They're talking at bandwidth in the orders of gigabits per second, not megabits per second. So it's going to be in the order of 100-fold increase of bandwidth or faster. There's a number of companies that are actually looking to develop these systems at the moment. Tesla with SpaceX is one of them. Facebook and Amazon are also looking at putting these systems into orbit. For a receiver device, you'll have what's called a UFO on a stick. The FCC in America have just approved 1 million of these devices to be deployed this year. It'll be a little UFO-shaped receiver on top of a stick with motors that track the satellites. So it'll actually be a smaller device than your current NBN satellite. So if these promises are met, then the solution to remote connectivity becomes a lot easier, because these will be by far and away the best option for connecting your homestead to get good, solid, fast broadband connections through to the site. It's just a matter of wait and see at the moment. We just don't know if the promises or the claims that they're making around performance are actually going to be met. And hopefully, if it is commercially available later this year, you'll start to get a better idea if it's worth waiting for them to be available in Australia. Otherwise, in the meantime, yeah, if you have 4G, that's a good option. The NBN satellite products are slowly getting better than they were when we did this report, when we were looking at just the consumer grade satellite options that were available. It'd be great to come in and say, here's one option, everyone should go for it. Unfortunately, it's just not there yet. So now we're going to have Nigel back again, and he's going to be talking with Steve from NAPCO, and they're going to run through some of their experiences at the moment on their property. Yeah, got you there, Nigel.
Good on you, Steve. So, Steve, you're up with NAPCO managing Alexandria at the moment, and you've been with NAPCO for almost 12 or a bit over 12 years now, so you've obviously seen a few changes in connectivity on stations. So, look, we've only got a few minutes before we move on to Alana, but just can you share with us your experience in the past in terms of connectivity, either at Landsborough when you were managing that property, or maybe since you've been at Alexandria, in terms of how has it changed for you?
Oh, Nigel, I guess it's come a long way, really. Wasn't that long ago we were all dealing with faxes and stuff like that. But I mean, you know, Alexandria alone, you know, I mean, in the past 5 odd years, it's come in an enormous way, really. You know, from virtually having no internet to what we have today. So, I mean, you know, we do rely on it fairly heavily nowadays, especially the way we run our businesses. And I mean, we've got sort of 60 plus people on this station, so you know, staff's obviously a big part of what we use our internet for in retaining and recruiting, of course. But Alex alone, we've got a pretty substantial schoolroom, so it too draws a lot of internet, and really to get our families here and keep them up to date, we really need it. But probably most importantly, I guess how we run our business, it's made a massive difference. But I mean, a long way to go as well. But you know, in being able to use this technology for making business decisions out in the paddock, like our water monitoring and you know, ability to be able to draft remotely, you know, through weights and using supplements and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly a lot better than it has been, Nigel. And you know, I guess really when I look at it, it's you know, it's not too bad at the moment. I mean, there's plenty of room for improvement. But I mean, the worst trouble we have here at Alex is when everyone has a day off, I suppose, and everyone gets on the internet. It's but I mean, normal day to day, it's actually not too bad.
So, Steve, it sounds like you've got two challenges at the end of the spectrum. One is keeping everybody's needs met, and it's not just work; it's social, especially when you mention a school and when everybody has the day off. But it's also making timely decisions out of the data that you're not now able to access. So there's quite a lot of capital cost in being connected. Do you actually see that you're getting a return on that investment, particularly for your water point monitors? Is it making a difference to what your staff do on a daily basis?
Oh, absolutely, Nigel. It you know, the fewer vehicles we have to run around and maintain, you know, I mean, we still have to maintain roads, and we still need to check waters, you know, on a weekly basis. But I mean, you know, the more we can do remotely, the more savings it is for us. And you know, the ability to be able to make decisions, you know, as a result of that, it's massive, and it's going to save us a lot of money. But you know, it's certainly come a long way in the last 5 years. But NAPCO's put significant investment into that, and trying to sort of stay ahead of the game. But you know, obviously there's a lot more work to do in it, and the better it becomes, you know, the more savings it'll ultimately supply for us, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now it's been almost 12 months since that work Bryce was contracted to do, and it's hard to believe. And already we now see the Ambien satellite service coming online, and there's Bryce pointing out that won't be too long, and we'll see almost 12,000 of those nano satellites in the air. So, look, just before we move on to Alana, what's on your wish list? What three, if you had unlimited opportunities, what three things would you like to see connected at Alexandria?
Oh, Nigel, most definitely. I guess out in the paddock for me, it's my ringers would disagree with me for sure, but I'd love to see, you know, I'd love to see coverage out in the paddocks where we can really get hold of some of this technology and get better at doing what we do, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's not just being connected with the outside world all the time. It's just making sure you're connected with your own staff and your own family and within your own farm gate. Absolutely. Steve, that's great, and it's much appreciated you can put some time into this today and also give Bryce that assistance when he was doing the survey. Look, we'll just move on to Alana now, and then we'll open it up for a bit of a Q&A. And Alana's our Northern Beef Adoption Manager. Now, we rely on a lot of services to get the MLA message out there, the extension part, but it also relies on adoption. So, Alana, I'll let you pick it up from there and just talk about why connectivity is so important.
Thank you, Nigel. So I'm just going to expand a little bit on what Nigel touched on briefly during his introduction, and I guess that's part of what good connectivity can get you through our MLA online system. So the first slide we have here is talking about My MLA. And what this is a personalized, unique experience platform for the user, which provides relevant information based on the user location and business type. And this is delivered via a customized dashboard. It can include a 7-day local weather forecast, customized market information related to individual business needs, local event listings, applicable research resources and tools, and a constant flow of relevant industry news, advice, and information. And that's just a bit of a snapshot there for you to see what it would look like, and then obviously you just personalize it to suit your needs, etc. So we now have a single sign-on for integrity information and quality assurance programs, which allows for NLIS, LPA, MSA, and LDL to be accessed with one username and password. MLA recently assumed responsibility for the integrated delivery of these key systems, and this is the first step in that streamlining process, and will mean that users of these services will no longer have to keep multiple logins and passwords. NLIS, MSA, LPA, and LDL will continue to hold producer information in the same way as they do now, and MLA will not gain access to information about individual users and their businesses. Using the new sign-in is not compulsory. Producers can still log in through individual usernames and passwords if they would like to. So Nigel showed this slide briefly at the start, so I'm just going to expand on a few things just for people's information. So one of the bits of information that's available on the MLA website is the annual call for event sponsorship, and I just want to bring to everyone's attention that applications for events in July through to December 2020, this call will open in early April, so only around the corner, and the sponsorship criteria is listed on the website along with information on how to request sponsorship. Feedback magazine, this is our bi-monthly magazine on practical on-farm information and sort of all the latest technological advances, but you have to subscribe to this, so you have to go online and subscribe. There's also e-newsletters, which includes Friday feedback, which is weekly, the new R&D roundup, which is monthly, and other newsletters such as global market updates. Again, you need to go on and subscribe on the MLA website, and you can list what your interests are, such as grass-fed cattle, which will then tailor the newsletters to suit you. That's everything from me, Greg. That's just a brief kind of roundup of what's on the MLA website, which obviously with better connectivity you know, be easier for people to access and get hold of that information that they need in a timely way.